It's Tim Sheets for TechSpot, and this is the Samsung Galaxy S5, the brand new flagship device from Samsung that I'm sure is set to sell millions and millions of devices worldwide, of course being the successor to the highly popular Galaxy S4. On the front we see a brand new Super AMOLED display. It's 5.1 inches in size and has a resolution of 1080p. It's also packing the Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 SoC plus 2GB of RAM. There's also a microSD card slot inside to complement 16 or 32GB of internal storage. On the back of the device you will find the 16 megapixel sensor as well as the brand new heart rate monitor, and on the front at the bottom you will find a fingerprint sensor embedded into the home button. Out of the box we're talking about a device running Android 4.4 complemented by Samsung's revamped TouchWiz UI, and this device retails unlocked and outright for around about $699 US. Diving right into the review, and you'll notice that the Samsung Galaxy S5 is styled in a very similar way to Samsung's previous devices like the Galaxy Note 3 and of course the Galaxy S4. It's a fairly standard ergonomic curved sort of design with Samsung's typical plastic around the entirety of the device. You notice especially around the edges here that you've got this sort of fake metal style plastic, which personally I don't think looks very good at all, but at least it does feel extremely comfortable in the hand as a device thanks to those curves. It's also relatively light, 145 grams, and slim. We're talking about 8.1 millimeters thick there, making this phone generally quite nice to hold in the hand. Comparing it directly to the Galaxy Note 3, which you can see there, and the device isn't exactly that much smaller than the massive device here, which has that 5.7 inch display on it. This device with its 5.1 inch display, as you can see there, does fit quite snugly inside, but it's not hugely smaller. You will notice the Galaxy Note 3 does have slimmer bezels around the outside, which is something that I would have liked to have seen on the Galaxy S5, but that said, it's not too bad. On the back, Samsung has finally got the message and has removed the slippery, smooth, and generally awful looking plastic that they've used on the Galaxy S3 and 4, replacing it with this sort of band-aid texture that they've got on the back, which feels actually quite nice. It doesn't have that same premium feel as, say, the Apple iPhone 5S or the HTC One M8 that I reviewed a couple of weeks ago, but it is definitely an upgrade over what we've seen in previous Galaxy devices. In fact, you can see here the difference in quality between the Galaxy S4 and the HTC One M8. You notice that the M8 has that brushed aluminium look that feels absolutely fantastic in your hands, whereas the Galaxy S5 is still made mostly of plastic. That said, this device is a little bit heavier, and as you can see, it's also a little bit taller. But the two devices, there's a lot of similarities between them. We've got a 5-inch display, a 5.1-inch display. But of course, we're not going to go too much into the HTC One M8. You can look at my review of that device if you want more information on it. This one is all about, of course, the Galaxy S5. Looking around the device, and on the right-hand side, we do have the fairly solid feeling power button, which does mean that it is in literally the perfect position for turning on and off this device. In a normal hand grip, you'll find that your thumb fits exactly perfectly with that power button, which is of course great to see. On the left hand side we do have the volume rocker. Again, it is that fake metal look that sort of looks quite crap, but that said, it does do the job, and it feels quite solid. On the top of the device we have the 3.5mm headphone jack as well as the IR LED, which lets you control TVs. This is a feature that has been implemented in a lot of modern day smartphones, and it is quite handy, but again, that's a feature that you'll probably either use or just completely ignore. On the bottom here, covered by this port, is the micro USB 3.0 port. As you can see, it's quite annoying to have to sort of open that port, but it does facilitate a feature that I'll talk about in just a sec. You notice here that it is the micro USB 3.0, meaning it's got those sort of two long style connectors. You can of course plug micro USB 2.0 straight into there. Interestingly, the performance from USB 3.0 isn't as great as I saw on the Galaxy Note 3, which is probably why they haven't included a USB 3.0 cable in the device's box. On the back at the bottom here we have the single rear speaker, which is okay but not great. I wouldn't say it's anything like Samsung's boom sound speakers. There's also plenty of room for branding. Normally a carrier logo or something would go in place of that 4G logo. Of course this is an unlocked and outright device. At the top we have the 16 megapixel camera with an f2.2 lens. Below it is the heart rate monitor in a sort of indented little notch there for it alongside the LED flash. I'll get into how the heart rate monitor works later on in the review. On the top of the device you will notice the in-call speaker alongside Samsung branding and the typical Samsung quite visible sensor array. There's also the front-facing 2 megapixel camera up there in the top right hand corner, and over here, which you can't actually see at the moment, is a notification LED. It's quite bright and visible, meaning that you will never miss a notification if this device is, for example, lying on your desk. Towards the bottom of the device, and finally Samsung has killed the menu button. Instead it has been replaced by the recent apps button. For example, you tap that and it shows applications that you have been recently viewing. Of course the back button is probably on the wrong side for the device, but this isn't a huge deal. We've also got the home button with the integrated fingerprint sensor. Again, that is something I'll talk a little bit about later on in the review, but let me just tell you right now, it's not very good. As I said earlier, the flap on the bottom of the device that protects the micro USB port gives it a very cool feature, and that is that it is IP67 waterproof. And that basically means that it can survive up to 1 meter of water for 30 minutes fully submerged. As you can see here, I have got a thing of water here just to demonstrate exactly the features. We can turn on the device, unlock it, and simply drop it in. It's very cool because the device still actually works underwater, as you can see there. Very cool. Unfortunately, you can't actually use the touchscreen underwater. It's impossible to get anything to work due to the way that the capacitive touchscreen actually works, but one thing you can do is actually enable or turn on the camera app before you submerge it and use the volume rocker to take photos. And one interesting thing to note about the Galaxy S5 is that despite the fact that it is waterproof, it still has the traditional Samsung removable back cover. You'll see a little notch in the side there. You can simply pull it apart, and it's got this seal around the outside that sort of prevents the water from getting into the critical components, which you can see here. We have got some pins for the wireless charging cover. We've got a fully removable battery that can be taken out just like that. We've also got a SIM and micro SD card slot at the top there. Again, removable battery is a handy feature for some people, although it does slightly reduce the battery capacity thanks to the 2 layers that is actually needed to house the battery. Make sure that if you are going to take the battery out, that you do fully close the device so that water does not get into the critical components. So as far as the design goes, I'm definitely happy with some of the refinements Samsung has made, especially ditching that terrible plastic on the back of the device. I'm still not a fan of the metal rim, but that said, it's still quite ergonomic and I don't think people will have generally too much of a problem, especially that Gorilla Glass on the front makes the display really lovely to use. Of course, you can just swoosh your fingers across and it feels fantastic. Now it's time to talk about the Super AMOLED display on the Galaxy S5. I haven't been a huge fan of Super AMOLED displays in the past. The ones found on the Galaxy Note 3 and Galaxy S4 just didn't have that quality that is seen in its rival LCD displays on top-end devices at the time. Generally the colors were quite good, but it was pretty hopeless outdoors, and it just had a few oddities that made it a little bit weird to look at. But that said, the Galaxy S5 Super AMOLED display is absolutely astonishing. This truly is one of the best displays I've ever used. It's not the most accurate. I can't exactly say that this display will show images exactly as they're intended, but the saturation and color quality alongside its performance outdoors, Samsung has definitely refined this display and it is now better than ever. And one way that you will generally notice this is from powering on the device the first time. You will see this lock screen and it looks absolutely amazing on this display. The colors, they just look just so fantastic. Again, this Super AMOLED display, they really have gone into a lot of detail, fixing the little things about the display. It's a lot better than it is in the past. It is a 5.1 inch display, so 0.1 inches larger than the Galaxy S4. Its resolution is still 1080p, meaning that we've got 432 pixels per inch. It also uses the pentile subpixel matrix, but that is something that you generally don't have to worry about. The resolution is a tiny bit reduced because of some technicalities to do with the pentile matrix, but that said, it still looks fantastic. Maybe not exactly the same sharpness as something like the HTC One M8, but it is still absolutely fantastic. And we're just going to go through and show you some of the things that you'll notice about this display. And one of them is, of course, that crispness and quality. As we bring it into focus for you, it looks exactly like paper. This is something that I've been going on about in past reviews. The display looks amazing when you're trying to read text. Thin fonts, everything is possible on this display. Looks absolutely fantastic. And one thing you will notice here is actually that they've fixed the white levels compared to some of the past Super AMOLED displays. The whites are now more accurate and brighter than ever before. I'm actually only running this display, as you can see there, not at full brightness. If we crank it up the whole way, is one of the brightest displays, maybe not rivaling some of the top LCD displays, but it's certainly an improvement over AMOLED displays that I've seen in the past. And again, the resolution on this is simply fantastic, although we can expect 2560 by 1440 displays coming in some of the future Super AMOLED displays, maybe on the Galaxy S5 Prime or something like that, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens in that space. Generally speaking, you can't go past the colors of the Super AMOLED display. It looks amazing, and we do have infinite contrast because of the fact that there is no backlight in this display. Everything just simply emits straight out, and it looks fantastic. If we show you some of the photos, these are actually camera samples that I've taken from the Galaxy S5 camera, and you'll see that it simply reproduces colors and it looks absolutely fantastic. Of course, this is a shot from the camera, so again, a little bit of praise to the camera that I'll speak about in just a little bit of time. One thing still prevalent in the display settings is the ability to change the display mode. By default, it is set to adapt display, which sort of changes the colors a little bit depending on what it's showing. You can also change it to dynamic, standard, professional, photo, and cinema. And you can see there that this sample photo at the top does change when you sort of adjust these settings. To be honest, I just leave it on adapt display because I think most people will probably not meddle with the settings in here. Some people believe that the cinema mode is more accurate than the standard mode. That's actually not true. The display still outputs colors slightly off if you use any of these modes, and I just sort of figure if it's not going to display colors accurately, I'll make sure that it displays colors as good as possible, and you really do get that by setting it to adapt mode and seeing those fantastic vibrant colors. Again, you can see here sort of the deep blacks that you get from there being no backlight in the Super AMOLED display. You also get a few things here. You'll notice increased touch sensitivity. You'll be able to use the device while wearing gloves, which is great for those people in cold climates. Let me tell you, it's actually getting pretty cold here in Australia, so maybe I'll have to wear gloves, and that feature will come in handy. Coming to the performance of the device, and inside we're looking at a Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 SoC clocked at 2.4 GHz across all 4 CPU cores. There's also an Adreno 330 GPU in there. We're getting all sorts of things such as LTE Category 4, Wi-Fi 802.11, AC, Bluetooth 4.0. There's also NFC in the device, GPS, and of course the IR LED on the top. It is extremely capable, comes with all those top-end features that you're used to from other devices running at the moment. We've also got this floating graph here that will just show how the device is performing in terms of what CPU speeds it's using as we browse around the device. And you can see here in CPU Z that we're just looking at the Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 itself. It's also paired with 2 GB of LPDDR3 RAM, and let me tell you, this device is astonishingly fast, as we saw on the HTC One M8, which is sort of our main look at the Snapdragon 801 if you want to go back and see a few things about that. But this device is extremely fast. I mean, there is no lag, which is something that you've been used to if you're using a top-end Android device of the past. You know, flicking through settings screens, you can do all sorts of stuff, and everything just loads extremely quickly. You know, we're talking about under a second lag in opening any application. browsing, multitasking, doing all these things, we can go right back to, say, Twitter that I've used before, and it loads everything instantly. There really is no lag in this device. Even in sort of more intense tasks, such as if we go here to Chrome, and if we load up TechSpot, not my TechSpot website browser test, but TechSpot itself, of course, using my slowish sort of Wi-Fi. Again, there's absolutely no performance difficulties, browsing through web pages like this. Of course, we're using a responsive site, so you can't zoom, but that said, there's really no performance difficulties here. And if you're blessed with things such as LTE in your country, or if you have a Wi-Fi 802.11 AC router, you will have an extremely fast device on your hands. It can even handle a lot of tabs quite quickly as well in that device, being able to multitask inside the browser itself. It's actually powerful enough to run a feature called multi-window, which you can see enabled up the top there. If you long press the back button, we can actually drag two applications into the device here, meaning that we can sort of do things such as browse photos at the top, scroll through messages at the bottom. This is an interesting multitasking feature. You can also adjust sort of the size of these two windows, but again, the Snapdragon 801 has absolutely no difficulty running a task like this. This is a powerful SoC that is more than enough for your tasks. When it comes to gaming, which is something that I'm not going to show you too much of, you can tend to find that this device will run all the games that you can find in the Play Store, no difficulty. You won't be able to crank up settings in a game like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas right up to the maximum quality settings, mainly because it's having to render at 1080p, but the Adreno 330 GPU is very fast, and you can see some benchmarks on the full written review that will sort of tell you exactly how fast it is compared to some top-end devices. Now it's time to take the mammoth trek through some of the software features on the Galaxy S5, and you'll notice here that we're still running TouchWiz over the top of Android 4.4, but it has received a visual makeover that sort of makes it look a little bit better than what we've seen in the past. There are no gradients to speak of. Finally, they've decided to sort of consolidate the look and feel across the entire operating system. I'm still not a huge fan of how it looks. It's quite heavy, and it doesn't tend to meld well with sort of stock Android. For example, here if we go into the contacts, they've sort of used this style, which is refined compared to the Galaxy S4, but if we head into an app such as the Play Store, they've sort of gone for a little bit of a different style. So there's sort of those two competing styles in between the two devices. But that said, we've got some refined things. The lock screen looks a lot better than what we've seen in the past. Again, I was showing you the notification pane. We've got these quick toggles at the top, a couple of quick settings. You can change the display brightness and all sorts of stuff really quickly. We've got standard Samsung widgets that you'll notice at the top here. We've got our app drawer. Some apps have been improved notably. We're seeing here we've got S Planner, which used to be extremely cluttered on devices like the Note 3. It has been refined significantly on the Galaxy S5. I assume they've been listening to feedback on that one. And they've also still got solid apps such as their music app, which performs quite well as far as I'm concerned. Again, there are some duplicate applications that I'm not too sure why they've included. For example, we know with Google Mobile Experience they need to include Chrome on the device, but for some reason they've also included their own internet browser. I tend to just use Chrome. And again, we've got both the Gallery application, which is much better than the Google Plus Photos app, but you will see some inconsistencies and annoyances having those two apps on the device. There are also some apps that aren't so good. One of them is S-Voice. This is an app I'm not really sure why you'd use, but we're definitely going to have that process. But for example, what we're going to do is just give you a little bit of a demo in between S-Voice and Google Voice Search. Google Voice Search is much better than S-Voice. We're just going to do something extremely simple, such as say, what is 4 divided by 3? Again, it seems to just take a lot of time to do things such as process. I'm just not sure why it... And you can see right there that it doesn't even actually give the right answer. It's not giving me the mathematical equation that I actually wanted. It's just not a good implementation. You can access it by double tapping on the home button, but again, it's just not something that I'd use. Meanwhile, on the device, you do have OK Google functionality. What is 4 divided by 3? So right there, it gives you exactly the right answer in a much shorter time. I just don't understand why you'd use S-Voice, or even why they've bothered considering the fantastic Google implementation on the device. We've also got a few other bloatware applications. We've got Samsung apps. Again, it's their own app store that I'm not really sure, again, why they've sort of included there. But there are truly some gems on the device, and one of them that I'd like to point out is not S Planner, but S Health. This is, of course, the new health application that is bundled with sort of the health focus on the Galaxy S5. This is a really good application that is bundled straight in the device, no need for a third-party application. I know there are apps like this that have been floating around for some time, but to have it included on the device is great to see. So you can browse around the application. We've got some of the standard features on here. Up the top, this is telling you a quick breakdown of what you've done in the day, how many steps you've taken, calories burned, and calories eaten. If you tap there, it will tell you the medals and sort of a more in-depth breakdown of how you're going in your workout regime. There's a sidebar over here that has all the different features of the application, and there's some quick shortcuts at the front. Notice you can get more apps in this device, which essentially makes the S Health feature, more complete, because you can install all sorts of stuff to track your fitness in different ways. But there aren't exactly a huge amount of apps on the store. When it loads, there's only about 3 apps or something. You can see the 3 apps load there. Not too much of a selection at the moment, but we hope that'll improve in the future. Again, we've got things such as the pedometer. Not sure how accurate the pedometer is. It does seem to put on a few steps when I'm tying my shoelaces and a few other things, but it does quite well, and you can sort of track your progress using graphs and all sorts of things like that. The exercise feature is extremely feature complete. You've got a whole bunch of different regimes that you can sort of set up. You can set a workout goal, for example, how far you want to go as a distance. You want to run 4.8 kilometers. Simply click start. It will show you exactly where you are, and it will give you a whole bunch of music options and stuff like that. Then it will give you a breakdown once you're finished of all the features. You can add pictures and all sorts of stuff like that. Again, you can always graph your progress. Another thing is the food section, which basically is a breakdown of all of your meals and a simple calorie counter. It has a fairly good database of things in there. And again, there's also a weight tracker. Not going to go too much into that. And now this brings us to the heart rate monitor, which is a new feature of the Galaxy S5, requiring that new hardware on the back that you can see there. So you simply head into the heart rate monitor. You can flip the device over or just keep it steady, and you can place your finger on the sensor. You'll notice it does light up a little bit there, just so that it can get a proper reading. And we can wait and see whether we'll get a measurement out of the device. So 89 beats per minute seems probably about reasonable for what I am at the moment. We can click start again and get another reading. Chances are this will be different. I'd be very surprised if we also got 89 beats per minute right now, but I've got all sorts of varying results out of this device. I mean, that's pretty close, not too bad. I have seen some variation up to 10 beats per minute if you're just resting and doing normal things. But one thing that I just simply don't understand about the heart rate monitor is that not only does it not give you a continuous readout of your heart rate, you have to continually press start, start, start to get a heart rate monitor over time. But the thing is that you're not going to be exercising and middle of the routine, stopping, getting out your smartphone, opening up this app, opening up the heart rate monitor, clicking start, and getting a measurement. It's something you will not be doing. It makes much more sense on the Gear Fit, which is their fitness related smartwatch. It makes much more sense on that device where the sensor is constantly in contact with your skin, but it just doesn't make sense on the Galaxy S5. I can't imagine anyone who is trying to do a high intensity workout would be middle of their run, stopping and getting a heart rate measurement. I sort of understand where they're coming from. The idea is that you go and you measure your heart rate before your exercise and after your exercise to sort of give that difference. But I figure that it's much more useful to get a sort of rundown of your heart rate throughout your workout. And for that respect, it's definitely a cool feature to be able to scan and get my heart rate, but applications have been doing this in the past using the camera and LED flash. It's just not something that I think is a really solid inclusion to the Galaxy S5. That said, I'm sure some people will find it useful, but the people who find it useful probably won't be me. And that brings me to the other main inclusion on the Galaxy S5, which is the fingerprint sensor. You notice here when I was browsing around the device before that I have actually disabled the fingerprint scanner option, and that is mostly because it really is bad. And I don't really say this lightly, fingerprint lock is not good. And the reason for that is before I could unlock the device, you can even use the swipe option and do your pattern unlock, and it unlocks quickly. But for example, if you do not swipe properly over the pad entirely, it will not let you in. You have to swipe exactly flat, put your device on, swipe down, and it will recognize. And this is a problem because you don't normally think of doing this exact movement with your fingers. For example, I set up to use either my thumb or forefinger to let me into the device. Normally I would think if I wanted to swipe over the home button that I would simply swipe like this. But it tells you have to swipe the entire pad, meaning that you have to get it perpendicular with the device, which is quite awkward to begin with, and swipe fully over the sensor. This is not exactly a good implementation. Apple uses a static sensor, meaning you simply have to place your finger on and it will read your fingerprint, but the swipe feature, it just doesn't work. The amount of times I have been trying to unlock my device, I've been going to swipe, I've been doing this over and over again because I'm not swiping exactly the way Samsung wants you to swipe, and finally on the 5th time it lets me in, I would simply ignore the fingerprint scanner. There are no two ways about it. It is just bad. It hinders your access to the device. It is quicker to use a password, quicker to use a PIN, quicker to use a swipe unlock method. I mean, again, just like the heart rate monitor, there's no doubt it's cool that you can unlock your device using a swipe of the fingerprint. And like you've seen here, I've sort of gotten better at the technique, but holding the device in one hand as I'm doing here now, it can be a little bit tricky to get your finger in the exact position required to unlock the device. It's just annoying. I had to spend probably a week or so learning how to use the fingerprint sensor properly. An end user is not going to have enough patience to learn a feature like this, turn it off, leave it off, and forget about the fact that it comes with the fingerprint sensor because you're probably not going to use it. That said, the fingerprint scanner does integrate with PayPal, allowing you to authenticate using a fingerprint for mobile payments. This is a more useful option because I hope your PayPal password is long, secure, and difficult to remember. So of course, replacing with something like a fingerprint is a pretty simple method of sort of not having to remember that tricky password. You just authenticate with biometrics, which is great. But for unlocking and locking the device, it is not something that I would recommend. And finally, the last software feature that I want to highlight is this, the settings menu. And let me tell you, I have not seen a settings menu so atrocious in all my years of reviewing smartphones. Look at how long this is. Seriously, look at all these options. I thought Windows Phone had long menu items, but this is honestly ridiculous. I do not know how anyone is supposed to find settings in this device. I'm quite experienced with using smartphones, so I can sort of deduce where you'll find the sort of different settings, but there is no way that a general user can come into this and find the settings that they want. You have got some of the quick settings available, admittedly right at the top. The areas that you'll most likely be wanting to use are right there. But for example, if I wanted to turn on, I wanted to change my mobile network settings, it's not here in the quick settings, but it's down here in more networks, then mobile networks. Of course, I don't have a SIM card in the device, but that is where that feature is located. For example, we've got display settings up there, but it's also down here alongside things such as the lock screen, one-handed operation, notification panel, various different things there. It's included twice in the settings display. What is going on there? Why is there two different settings? Why is there so many bloody settings in this device? I just don't know. You've got power saving at the top, which is a different settings menu to the battery options. I honestly do not know what is going on here. Why have they included so many settings? Please, Samsung, condense your settings options, get rid of the duplicates, make it more user-friendly. I mean, the fact that they have to have a search option in the settings is just unbelievable. fix it, it's not acceptable. The final area of the Samsung Galaxy S5 that I'd like to talk about is the rear camera. It is a 16 megapixel 1/2.6 inch sensor with 1.12 micron pixels, no optical image stabilization, but it does have an f2.2 lens on the back. Now you notice here that this isn't exactly the greatest combination in the world for low light imagery, and it definitely comes through in the images. You're not going to get great low light results on this phone, but that said, you will get some truly astonishing results in strong lighting. This is one of the greatest cameras I've seen on a smartphone in that regard. Of course, nothing too spectacular to look at here on my sort of studio setup here, but we'll just take you through some of the settings that you can find on the camera. Of course, you have got this entire array of sort of options and things to deal with. You notice here that when you're talking about video, we can actually go up to 4K. Definitely check out the 4K video samples in the full written review that you can check out there. This is a 16 megapixel 16:9 sensor, meaning that by default it takes pictures, like I said, 16:9 resolution, it fills the entire display. It's actually not too much taller than the 13 megapixel sensor in the Galaxy Note 3. The extra resolution has gone into the width, and does of course produce some fantastic results. What we have got here is real-time HDR mode. This isn't something that is going to come across all too well in the camera, but what it actually does is when you enable HDR mode, it enables HDR mode in the preview, and you can sort of see exactly what's going on and exactly what picture you'll be able to take. There's also another feature called selective focus. Basically, this is imitating the duo camera features of the HTC One M8. Nothing too spectacular there, it doesn't work particularly well. We also have a couple more modes there that you can just sort of play around with yourself if you do happen to get the Galaxy Note 5. But it's time to look at some sample shots, and what you will notice is that the Galaxy S5 is simply astonishing in strong lighting. That HDR mode does a really good job of making photos look fantastic. You also get 16 megapixels, so of course there is some serious resolution to play around with. In moderate lighting, there tends to be a few issues with shutter speed that I sort of go into more depth in the full review, but that tends to make some photos a little bit blurry thanks to that lack of optical image stabilization. But that said, the color quality and sort of contrast, dynamic range and things like that you get from your indoors and cloudy photos is still quite good. Something called the software image stabilizer comes into play when you're talking about low light, sort of nighttime photography, where it sort of takes a burst shot and it attempts to select the least blurry photo that you've taken. It works reasonably well. It uses a lower shutter speed and sort of makes the photos actually look a little bit better than what you'd expect out of a device that's not really geared towards low light photography. That said, there's a lot of post-processing and results just generally aren't as good as you'll see from the HTC One M8 or Nokia Lumia devices. But to be perfectly honest, the results that you get out of the Galaxy S5 most of the time tends to lead me to prefer that to the camera on the HTC One M8. Despite the duo camera features and its dominance in low light, there are just some things about the Galaxy S5's camera that I prefer, especially its strong lighting performance, which is top of its class. So as we approach the end of the review, it's time to give my final verdict on the Galaxy S5, and there are definitely some things to like about the device and some things that they have done extremely well. One of them is the display. This is the best Super AMOLED display I've used. It's fantastic outdoors, fantastic indoors, and colors look simply fantastic. For example, here, if we just show you again that screen, it looks great on this display. They've really done some wonders on the AMOLED technology. It's also an extremely powerful device. The Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 makes this a breeze to use. It's also reasonably power efficient, meaning you'll get good battery life out of the device. The 16 megapixel camera on the back is great outdoors, taking some photos in strong lighting. It's not as good in low light, but that can be forgiven because it's generally quite good all around. The design has been refined to an extent. I'm happy that they've finally ditched the crappy plastic on the Mac, but it's still not at the same level as the HTC One M8, iPhone 5S and other devices that sort of have that premium build quality, and it's something that I'd like Samsung to look at in the future. There are definitely some refinements to TouchWiz around the operating system. The settings screen is simply still an absolute atrocity that needs addressing, but that said, there are some definite improvements that have been made, making the design look a bit more coherent. That said, it still doesn't meld well with stock Android, and there are a few applications that still I'm a bit iffy about, such as S-Voice, But S Health is a fantastic application, S Planner has been refined, and generally speaking they have actually improved TouchWiz in the Galaxy S5. That said, the heart rate monitor on the back is a gimmick that I don't think is all that useful. It's certainly cool, but I just don't understand the real meaning behind it and how it will really help you in your use of a smartphone. It's much more suited to a device like the Gear Fit, and the fingerprint scanner is quite simply poorly implemented and not a very good way of securing your device, because it is just so frustrating to use and to try and unlock the device. So that is something that for me gets a pass. Overall, the Galaxy S5 isn't an amazing or revolutionary device, but it certainly is very serviceable. It does a lot of things great, some things not so well, but I think generally it'll be perfectly fine for most smartphone users who are looking for a high-end device that packs in a ton of features. And that's it for this review of the Samsung Galaxy S5. I hope you all have enjoyed it, and don't forget to check out the full written review. It's about 8,000 words long, goes into a lot of in-depth analysis on the device, and there's a few charts and benchmarks in there which I think you'll find pretty interesting. Also, subscribe to this YouTube channel and you'll get more reviews coming to you in the future. I've got a pile of review devices to get through, including the Xperia Z2 and the Nokia X coming up very shortly. If you have any questions about the Galaxy S5, feel free to send them my way on my Twitter @ScorpusV. You can also follow TechSpot @TechSpot. Thanks guys, and this has been a TechSpot video review.